The CIS benchmarks are secure configuration recommendations for hardening specific technologies in an organization's environment. Each benchmark is the product of an ongoing consensus project involving the generous volunteer efforts of subject matter experts, technology vendors, public and private community members, academics, and the CIS benchmarks development team. CIS benchmarks are a key component of an organization's overall security against cyber attacks, and each CIS benchmark recommendation maps to the CIS critical security controls, or CIS controls. There are more than 100 CIS benchmarks across 25 plus vendor product families available through free PDF download for non-commercial use. CIS benchmarks coverage includes security guidelines that are applicable to cloud provider platforms and cloud services, containers, databases, desktop software, server software, mobile devices, network devices, and operating systems. Learn more about CIS benchmarks by visiting CISECURITY.org/benchmarks.
Listening to the Barcode Podcast with your host, Chris Glandon, serving cybersecurity straight up with no chaser. Let's hit the bar and grab a drink.
Excuse me. Hey, excuse me, buddy. Yo, move, man. Damn.
Oh, hello, Chris. My apologies. Patron ID 8701 has exceeded his threshold of alcoholic intake. In other words, he has had one too many.
Yo, what's up, Boozebot? Yeah, you're right. And your AI is 100% accurate on that one. That dude is stumbling into the wall, man. He obviously has no idea where he's going. Boozebot, you may have to switch to aggressive mode and remove this guy soon.
Affirmative. I have also detected that this is his first appearance here, and obviously is a script kiddie. He is accompanied by an acquaintance. He departs from the bar to go out and smoke a cigarette, then when he returns, he cannot locate his acquaintance that is waiting for him at the bar.
What? How is that possible?
I've calculated two theories. Theory number 1, he is smoking a very strong cigarette, or theory number 2, it's this killer new drink I'm pouring tonight, and he cannot handle this Boozebot sleeper, son.
You need to stop hanging around with Tony on your nights off, man. You're starting to sound like him. And I have a different theory. Check it out. See, here at Barcode, all patrons at the bar are typically on their laptop with a drink next to it. You know, that's just the way it is. This drunk dude obviously is so inebriated, he keeps approaching a random person at the bar. Then, once he realizes that that first person he bothered is not his friend, he's going to randomly go to the next bar stool, either to the left or to the right. I've seen this before. You know, think of it like this. The easiest way to simulate him is you flip a coin. Heads, he's going to go right. Tails, he's going to go left. You just never know.
Threat level increased.
Exactly. And his probability doesn't get any better with each attempt. He's what I call a classic drunk. He just can't handle his liquor. But you know what? He isn't as bad as a quantum drunk.
Quantum drunk? My knowledge DB is not familiar with that term. What the hell is that?
Well, you take the classic drunk where you flip a coin for each direction. With the quantum drunk, the coin is quantum. It can be in a superposition of heads and tails at the same time. The quantum drunk is following a path that is a superposition of left and right at each bar stool.
While my ML processes this, I will alert security. But first, since you found a seat at the bar yourself, I'm going to generate this superpositional drink for you. It's called an absinthe drip. You pour 1 1/2 ounces absinthe into a stemmed glass. Place a slotted absinthe spoon over the rim of the glass, and set a single sugar cube on top of the spoon. Using an absinthe fountain, drip 4 to 6 ounces of ice-cold filtered water over the sugar cube into the glass. When the mixture is completely cloudy, the drink is ready. Enjoy.
Thanks, BoozBot. Well, speaking of quantum, two awesome friends of mine who happen to know a thing or two about quantum just walked in. Import this into your knowledge database.
Acknowledged. See you next round. Excuse me, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Victoria Kumaran and Mark Carney are the founders and organizers of Quantum Village, which will debut next month at DEFCON 30. So today, Barcode is getting quantum. Victoria, Mark, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So as you both know, I was hoping to have you both here on site for this conversation at the new Barcode studio, still in progress in Delaware. But unfortunately, that didn't work out. But you both have Delaware connections. Is that right?
I do.
Yeah.
I think everyone in the world who has a company might have a Delaware connection. Someone did tell me the other day, I thought only companies live there, but no, I do quite often.
I was going to say, my main connection is knowing that friends who have companies there. So,
well, it's a plus that you know Delaware is a state, because I often talk to people that I say Delaware and they're like, what state is that in?
Oh, wow.
Biden coming back and being president has been very helpful for that, because he's been doing really good publicity for the state. I had a lot of people being like, I know where you are now.
Yeah, whether you're for or against Biden, he at least put Delaware on the map.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Rehoboth, Delaware, which he also likes, and I've been on the bike route that he goes on, so I sort of feel.
Did you fall off though?
No, I don't think you should go there. No, unfortunately not. But I will admit I was going very slow, because it had been about sort of 10, 15 years since I've been on a bike, and this was during pandemic. So it was one of the sort of few things you could do, and that sort of encouraged me to sort of get out there and get healthy, I guess.
That's cool.
And Mark, you're currently in Paris, is that right?
I am currently in Paris. As of recording tomorrow, I am speaking at Hack in Paris, actually on post-quantum cryptography and the quantum threat for enterprises. So yeah, it's kind of a nice arrangement that I get to try some of the material here first, although obviously it'll be heard later.
Yes, not too much later. So hopefully if that session gets recorded, we can post it on the episode notes and point people that way. If not, we'll catch you at Quantum Village.
Oh, absolutely.
But I do want to ask you both, and we can start with Victoria if you don't mind. Talk to me about your evolution into security and how you personally became focused on quantum computing.
Sure. Mine, I think, like what I'm seeing, like a lot of people, is quite convoluted. I've actually got a art and design background. I spent some time, which I'm realizing is actually very helpful. I think, cybersecurity certainly is quite a multidisciplinary, requires a skill set that's fairly multidisciplinary. And then I moved into finance. So I've always understood the sort of business side, and that's like the investing side, and also on the sales side. So I did that. And then I started working with some startups. I think like everyone these days, sort of your rite of passage. It's quite a nice way of dipping your toe in the water, because any startup's like, oh, wow, someone with actual real life experience willing to work, and working around the sort of machine learning applications, around malware detection, things like that, all the good and fun stuff wrapped into AI, which obviously I think about 5 years ago would have been known as snake oil in the security world, or certainly with a lot of suspicion, but then also a lot of adoration. And I think having witnessed that, obviously with quantum computing, there was sort of some rumbles again about 5 years ago, when there was sort of a resurgence. And certainly I think in the last year or two, there's been that kind of build up with a lot of people recognizing its power and its capabilities, and that it's sort of coming, and that, the defense capabilities and obviously the offensive capabilities, and then the really good, exciting ones that I think we're going to talk about as well.
Yeah, for sure. And Mark, how about you?
I came to it. So I first encountered quantum computing as like a module when I was studying. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. And then promptly never thought of it again until someone said, oh, what are we going to do about the quantum threat? And I was like, what quantum threat? Being threatened by photons in a back alley. But no, the quantum threat turns out it's a real legitimate sort of idea that quantum computing is going to come to a level of maturity that causes problems for cybersecurity. So I was dealing with it from my role as, I'm a cybersecurity researcher, and I advise a lot. So, there's all the doing, pen tests or red team engagements and then writing reports. And then when you do the research side, there's also a lot of consultancy that goes with that for sure. And so I was picking it up there, and I wasn't thinking too much of it. I found a few papers, I read them, and the more I read them, the more I understood. And then I eventually pieced together this idea that actually doing more quantum stuff, learning quantum information theory more properly was very interesting. And so I just carried on. So that's kind of how I came to it, more through a kind of a more sedate, work life kind of a thing.
Yeah. So, Mark, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
For those that are unfamiliar with quantum computing, like myself, I haven't done the research. I don't have hands-on experience with quantum computing. And like Victoria mentioned, I've seen the aggressive path that quantum computing has taken over the past few years. Yeah. Is it possible that you could explain it to us in terms of what quantum computing is and what it consists of?
Yeah, sure. So a common misconception with quantum computing is that it's just faster computing. We're used to seeing that Moore's law growth. We're used to seeing, if we just keep jamming transistors and jamming parallelization in, we get to somewhere faster. And there's a misnomer that quantum is just that. It's not. Quantum computing is not going to make Microsoft Flight Simulator run any better or worse. You're going to have to just give NVIDIA yet more money, and then it will work properly, I'm sure. So that's what quantum computing isn't. What is it? It's a way of looking at computation that is quite different. So we're used to bits, okay? That's the language of computers, bits, zeros and ones. If you could imagine that you could have a bit as a little arrow pointing up and for a 0 and pointing down for a 1, then you could imagine that arrow might be balanced between the two of them. And that's a way of looking at superposition. The idea that you have this balanced kind of two states superimposed on each other, they're equally likely. So when you do a measurement, that's when you actually get the output from a quantum computer. And the measurement says, 0 or 1. And what is different is that with a switch, with a transistor, when you ask it 0 or 1, we've built them to say 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, or 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. They'll give you the same answer. A quantum computer won't. It'll give you a 0 or 1 with a probability of 0 or 1. So it's basically probabilistic computing. Now, probability has a lot of power to it, especially if you can learn how to control the qubits, not just individually, but also together. So the ability to have two qubits interact with each other in a way that you control the state between those two qubits.
Qubits being the 1 or the 0?
Qubits being the fundamental unit of quantum computing. So a qubit is a thing that can be a 0 or 1 when it's measured. Think of it this way. When it's measured, it's a bit. It's a 0 or a 1. But before it's measured, it's a qubit, which can do things like superposition, which is one of the main kind of properties. It can also be entangled. So you can actually have a qubit that is strongly and mathematically related to another qubit on, the other side of the computer or on the other side of the planet. Quantum mechanics doesn't really care. So quantum computing is a very different way of approaching it that lets you deal with notions and ideas from physics in a way that is computationally advantageous. And that's really the power of quantum computing. So what are we talking about there? We're talking about the ability to compute over every possible key in a key space. If I have 128 qubits, I can compute over all possible keys. And there are certain algorithms that might, and I say might, we're yet to actually see a 128-bit AES key, for example, be broken on a quantum computer. We haven't seen that yet. But the theory says that it can be done. And we know how we think we should go about it in a way that, well, we think works. And the little toy versions we've done, they work. So why would you go over the whole key space? So that you can extract the key.
Why haven't we seen that yet? Is it just the cost of that process?
It's the cost of the process. It's also the fact that it's really bloody hard.
Okay.
Right? It is a hard problem. So to give you an idea about how you make a qubit, there's lots of different ways. There's no universal transistor. So when you saw microchips first coming out, you saw a standardization in the way in which we thought about transistors, the way we built transistors. And the transistor became the fundamental building block of binary circuits. So the idea of a solid state controllable switch. With qubits, we haven't got there yet. But when you think about how some of the qubits are made, that's going to give you a clue as to why it's hard. So one thing is an ion trap qubit. And literally what you do is you take a little area about the size of a basketball enclosed in metal, and you pump all the air out of this space. So there's more nothingness inside that chamber than there is in outer space. Okay? So this is like really empty. You then make it really cold. Okay? How cold? If you're familiar with degrees Kelvin, 0 being absolute 0, you can never get there, but it's the coldest temperature theoretically. You're talking about 1 or 2 degrees Kelvin at the hottest.
Jeez.
Yeah, so we build this, and then what you do to have a quantum computer is you take an individual atom, literally just one atom, and you suspend it in a little cup made from radio waves.
Interesting.
And then to control it, you hit it with lasers. Everything in quantum sounds cool. That's one thing you can certainly say about quantum computing, is that everything's, I've said space, I've said impossible vacuum, I've said impossibly low temperatures, lasers are involved, radio frequency cups. I mean, when was the last time you lifted something with an antenna? You probably don't do that every day, right? But that's what you do. And if you look at the way that IonQ is one company who make quantum computers that do this, Continuum are another company that have huge quantum computers, most of the quantum computer is actually the control circuitry, which is something we'll talk about in a bit in terms of how do you threat model, or what's the attack surface of a quantum computer? That's a really interesting question, because there's so much that goes into making qubits do what we want them to. But to give you a scale of the problem, a qubit is some fundamental unit of physics that is directly manipulated. I won't say controlled, because that's slightly not the right picture. So that's why you've not seen huge scale quantum computers, because just getting 10 atoms to float in 10 individual radio frequency cups, in a vacuum emptier than outer space, that's also very, very
extremely difficult to pull off.
Exactly. So, scaling that up, and that's what they're trying to do now. They're trying to scale that idea up so that we can have, 100 atoms floating in space, expertly controlled by, very advanced electronics and control systems. But that's the kind of challenge you've got to get over. And that's not even the only kind. There are transmon qubits. There are topological qubits. There's potential for doing quantum computation with photons, so photonic qubits. There's a lot of different ways of approaching this problem. None of them seem to be universal enough and reliable enough, which is why none of them has really won out yet. I'm sure at some point we'll get a big development. Someone will work out a really cool engineering thing, which will then be able to say, okay, this is how we scale. And everyone will probably follow suit, I imagine. I don't know. I haven't got a crystal ball. But I think that goes some way to explain why we've not got quantum computers on our desktops yet.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I'm still processing it, but it makes sense to me. But let's talk about quickly, our industry and cybersecurity and what you just said. I can visualize it, but how does that directly relate to cybersecurity, and how can it, in your opinion, impact us and what we do?
I guess the immediate one would be in terms of cryptography. The fact that quantum computers are likely to break RSA public key cryptography, which we are, most of our lives sort of rely on. That's probably the most immediate one. Fortunately, these computers aren't fully operational now, or some suspect they may never be, although I think that view is sort of diminishing.
But the potential is there, so it's almost like you have to think ahead in terms of that. And
there's certainly, the money of recent years is being put into it, that there is that kind of almost like, I imagine, the space race in the 60s, it's something comparable to that.
So you mentioned breaking RSA public key cryptography, but would it help on the other side in terms of strengthening cryptography?
Absolutely. And that is something that is going on by NIST. They have an open call right now to look at new methods of cryptography. And those are being evaluated. I believe they're in the third stage with a lot of delays, which for just getting the read on the community right now. We were sort of expecting to have new standards published this year. Part of why we thought Quantum Village would be perfect for this year was kind of in tandem with that. But I know, Mark, certainly you've got a bit of more of an insight into what's being done on the sort of organizational level.
Yeah, so we're all anticipating and waiting for NIST to publish their post-quantum cryptography PQC Cipher results. And they're basically going to turn around and say, okay, these are the ones that made it through several years of very deep and careful analysis. Some have fallen off quite graciously. They were analyzed and it's like, oh, it's not quite strong enough. It's not quite good enough. And then others have fallen off quite dramatically. One was called Rainbow, and you might have seen some news articles that Rainbow was broken, meaning that someone found that you could break the Rainbow post-quantum cipher with a regular laptop in about a weekend.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah, apparently no one told them it had to be classical safe as well. But that's unfortunate, I think, really. I don't think they intended that particular gap, but it turns out there was enough leverage in one of the requirements on Rainbow that you could actually, you could leverage it to be able to get out and discern parts of the original key. So ultimately, we're going to be waiting for NIST to publish. A lot of people are holding their breath. There's been some kind of rumblings around various communities, especially around like risk and compliance, because NIST haven't really said much about what's going to happen with FIPS, the Federal Information Processing Standard, which is like a bedrock requirements for any large-scale data processing corporation that does anything in America, which is basically everyone, So they haven't said too much about how it's going to affect that. So what does a post-quantum world really look like? I don't know entirely. And that's part of the conversation we want to get rolling. Like, we've got huge organizations who are going to need at some point to move over to these new cryptographic ciphers, which are so they're still classical ciphers. They're still things that run on regular computers, but you're going to need to install them, to standardize them first, get the code ready, get it tested, and then push it out to everyone, like literally everyone. That's not a straightforward task if you look at some like of the more interesting interview questions, like, oh, how would you move a country from driving on the left to driving on the right? Like, oh, that's quite difficult. But then you can see that Norway did it in the 60s, and you can kind of read how they went about it. It's actually, it's one change that kind of, if you were careful about it, it all worked. But post-quantum is a huge thing. All new ciphers, new key lengths, new cipher suites, new cipher modes, new hashing algorithms. Everything's different. And so everything is unfamiliar. And that's the real danger, like people making mistakes because it's so new. How are we going to get people trained, and how are we going to get people aware? And that's where kind of Victoria and I came to the idea of Quantum Village. Like, how can we look at these technologies, not just post-quantum cryptography, it's not just post-quantum village, but obviously a huge thing for security is, post-quantum cryptography. How can we get the people to understand it, to understand the threats around?
Make it a bit more friendly and not too fearful. Although arguably we probably are at risk right now, with store now, decrypt later being probably what's touted around, with the idea that, we are probably all being hacked, with a view of someone storing the data to then decrypt it once they have a quantum computer. And I think we also need to be just a little careful when you send messages like that, because, it's sort of that kind of, oh, everything's on fire. And, that usually leads to more chaos than control.
Give me a dollar amount on building a quantum computer. Like, say an attacker is going to build a quantum computer. What's that going to run them?
Oh, I don't think we're at the stage where the attacker would build it, but I'm sure you could probably look up what sort of some of the specs.
Okay.
I'll joke, because there are some listed companies, or we could probably get some data together. There's certainly some resources out there.
You can't go to Best Buy and get what you need to build this computer.
No, but there's a lot of sort of, billions and sort of floating around. And I think that's probably where making people more quantum aware and sort of getting buy-in is quite important, because I think it has become a sort of nation state concern. And, just speaking in the West, for instance, like our spending might not necessarily be comparable to other countries. So there is that kind of definitely a sort of competition going on, I think, to see who could get there first. But I imagine it's accelerating year on year. It's certainly kind of doubling, and still relatively small, perhaps, in relation to other industries, though. Yeah, I'd imagine.
There's also, I'm a bit more of an optimist. I think that the way that quantum computing companies have gone is I've heard through a friend that you can't buy them. Even though there are companies that make them, you can't actually buy them. What they want to do is push it out as a service. And you can see why. They can control the uptime and the downtime. There's a service contract with themselves, which makes it a bit more straightforward. So what they're starting to look at selling is, services, access to quantum computers, time on quantum computers. And the way that they're doing that is they're kind of federating it through the cloud providers. So Microsoft Azure, Google CIRQ, IBM Qiskit, and Amazon Bracket. Or if you're feeling really, because so Bracket is the notation name. So people call it Amazon Bracket, but a physicist will very quickly come from behind the curtain and correct you. I think you'll find it's Bracket.
Good to know.
Already got snobbery going on, don't worry. But sort of now you can get access to it. And I think that's double-edged in a potentially good way, because we want to engage people with this technology. And now there are cloud services that are relatively inexpensive to free, where you can actually use for real a quantum computer right now. You could write code, you can run through a Python notebook. It's all the interfaces are written in Python APIs. So you could just run a notebook and you can send your circuit off and it will be run on a real quantum computer and your results will come back and you can analyze them. So although on the one hand, you're exactly right, Victoria, we are not spending as much and we are falling behind on a bit of a skills gap, the potential for fixing that, I think, is there.
Absolutely. And I mean, with cloud, it does make it accessible. I imagine, a few decades ago, if you were a researcher, you had to be near sort of the latest supercomputer. You couldn't have that access, and there's certainly something wonderful in that. But I mean, perhaps for certain researchers, not being able to physically get their hands and see what's really going on behind, and see what the secret sources might be, slightly frustrating. But there are other aspects. I imagine relying on AWS's security versus their own helps kind of lower other costs as well.
Yeah. So QAAS coming your way soon.
Yeah.
Already here for some.
Already here. Yeah. So how about the training aspect for those that are interested in quantum? Is there any training out there that people can take advantage of? Obviously, you want to get the Quantum Village to start the conversation. But is there anything that's available right now that you guys recommend?
Ooh, there's lots. I think from our perspective, we do have like a sort of page of links. Everyone from IBM to say Sandbox AQ, a lot of these companies are providing a lot of good starting courses. I think because we are in that era of open learning, which is really fantastic. There's definitely stuff on Coursera. I don't know, Mark, if you've got specific ones to point out.
Sure. So there's courses on Coursera. You said there's courses on Udemy. Some of those are quite advanced. Some of them are less advanced. Some are more hands-on. There's a really good learning suite from Qiskit, which has I think it's qiskit.com/learn. Which is like a really nice resource, really well laid out.
Yeah, that's the IBM one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's IBM. Sorry, Qiskit is IBM's quantum computing Python library.
There's actually, I think they've got something coming out in a couple of weeks. If there's someone who's very keen to do a sort of remote learning, if they really want to delve into it.
Nice.
And then on the other side, I mean, at some point, someone's going to say there's a really good book, but there is actually a really good book, which is self-contained, as in it contains a good overview of how quantum computers are put together. It covers over the building blocks and then how you turn those building blocks into quantum algorithms. And then also, just because of completeness, the last section is entirely about just a refresher on the mathematics you need. You actually don't need much. Like, if you have quantum information without the physics, like the mathematics of quantum information is not higher than high school vectors and matrices and linear algebra. Now that might still instill fear in a good number of people, and that's fine. But if you wanted to get quite a deep dive, there's a book called Quantum Computing: An Applied Approach, which by Jack Heddery, which is I've recommended it for a long time. It has all of those pieces built in. For post-quantum cryptography, there's a book of the same name, published by Springer. I think that's Dan Bernstein and company from Eindhoven University, which has got everything you want to do to understand the primitives about the post-quantum ciphers. So depending on which thrust you're after, whether you want to learn how to program a quantum computer or whether you want to learn how these post-quantum algorithms are going to be affecting your life and how to understand them better, I'd say those two are probably the books I would recommend for people's libraries.
Yeah, if anyone wants a lighter one, there is a quantum computing wired guide, which I sort of chewed through at the airport kind of thing, by Amit Katwala. It's like a 100-page thing. You can sort of even give it to a curious relative if you are quite technical as well, which I think is always nice, because you can kind of just get a sort of bird's eye view over the impacts and the exciting things as well that's coming, not just the sort of scary ones, perhaps.
Yeah, that was really well written, and I think he's done a lot of articles in Wired, I think. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, there's some really good tech communication journalists out there that I think hopefully we can get them to Quantum Village as well, because we we definitely, I think, are trying to ensure that communication piece is helped forward.
Do you guys know of any government initiatives or national initiatives to boost funding around quantum computing or to boost these educational and training efforts? Or is it, I know, Mark, I know you said that this was part of your curriculum. Is there any curriculum in academia today that focuses on quantum computing?
So in academia, there's been courses on quantum computing for quite a while. In fact, my alma mater, University of Leeds, one of the guys who co-invented one of the foundational algorithms, the Deutsche Jose, so Jose was actually at Leeds for a while. He taught a quantum computing course about 15, 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I mean, the algorithms that break cryptography, like Shor's algorithm, was invented in 1994. Love Grover invented Grover's, what is now called Grover's search, in 1996. So we've actually had a strong background. It's the usual story, engineers or computer scientists come along, and then there's some physicist or mathematician in the background going, yeah, here's the last 50 years on that subject for you. You're welcome. It's kind of how they treat it. In terms of also more active courses and initiatives, I can speak from the EU perspective for sure. The UK is building a national quantum computing centre, which has got a big mandate for developing and incubating quantum startups, developing quantum computation, developing an academic understanding, and also fostering education programs. I'm not entirely certain quite what that looks like right now. I don't think they've finished building their headquarters yet, but there's a big investment there. Likewise, in the Netherlands, you have they have departments or groups that usually end in the word Delta. So they have the security Delta for a while, which a few people might have heard of, who do a lot of work in cybersecurity, bridging policy, compliance, and technical people. Well, they've just announced or just started the Quantum Delta, which has got 650 million euros over X many years funding to do almost a similar thing, as I mentioned, for the British one. So they're planning on having a silicon fabrication lab, and they're going to build quantum computers and again incubate startups, but push education programs. There's a lot of people who are realizing, certainly that there is a gap, and we need to do something to sort of try and close it. I'm not too sure what the American perspective is, though.
I mean, definitely, America has the National Science Foundation. I've done a little research grant with them, and they are, I think, the sort of OG in funding those more kind of blue sky research projects. And they are doing quite a lot, and there are sort of centers popping up. I know I think in Chicago, there's quite a sort of burgeoning quantum startup community there. And certainly, I think you're noticing, I think we've all got this sort of, I hate this word, innovation. And you sort of, I don't know, whenever I flip between the UK and the US, every time I go back, someone's telling me that, this town or this, I don't know, Gibraltar is going to be the crypto capital, or, and so on. I'm sure in Delaware, I mean, I always know that in Delaware we've got credit cards, right?
Chris?
Yeah. Things have got to sort of develop in certain pockets, and Boulder, Colorado is obviously kind of a big epicenter for quantum computing. So there's a lot of activity, and certainly all the big, universities and labs are definitely getting in on it. I think there's probably going to be an element of not perhaps revealing on what's going on, but we can definitely pull together some stats.
The NSF did also publish, I think, a document called American Leadership in Quantum. So there's definitely a drive that side.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Yeah, we could become, Delaware could become like Area 52, where everything's, classified, and then we just unleash it.
I still I get excited when I sort of drive around like the DC area, and it's like Quantico, the Pentagon, and everything. And I've got no idea what these are, but friends will tell me, or colleagues will tell me, like, this is really important and secretive. So.
Yeah. So yeah, as quantum computing continues to accelerate, I'd love to see the quantum aspect become more prevalent in cybersecurity curriculums, and that I don't see happening right now.
I'm sure there is still grappling with like machine learning threats and things.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So it's sort of like, let us digest this buzzword first before we go on to the next one. And then you'll probably get some networking guys like, can we deal with the real problems that are, prevalent today?
Yeah. I think that Quantum Village may, expose that need, and that's what I'm hoping for.
We're definitely hoping that, and hoping just to kind of make it more familiar, make people more just aware. You don't necessarily need to become an expert, but understand the implications and be sort of measured about planning. Certainly, I think for InfoSec professionals, I'm very curious to see how they react. We were at RSA earlier this month, and it was actually quite interesting. People received it quite well. I was sort of expecting, maybe it's because you weren't sort of dishing out, we're going to capture 99% of your problems, or, those kind of outlandish claims that people were sort of, I don't know anything about this, tell me about this, or I feel like I need to know a bit more than I do.
So putting quantum computing within cybersecurity curriculums would just be too soon at this point.
I think you're right in terms of, because the usefulness just isn't there yet. So quite how we're going to use quantum computing for things that we definitely know it's got an advantage for. So things like actually quantum computers you can think of as incredibly efficient optimizers. Even though they take all this energy to be very cold and very empty and all that other stuff, like actually they're still really efficient at like finding a minimum in a search space, which correlates to a minimum on a curve that is based on a machine learning problem, as in the training side. Or if you're looking at ways of doing optimization across different network problems or traveling salesman style problems. Quantum computers are really good at that. That's where you can think they're basically brilliant optimizers, first and foremost. They will do other stuff, I am sure, but right now, most of the theory says that the place we're going to start is in optimization. So they have applications in finance, in machine learning, in...
Oh yeah, the fund managers are already in on it, aren't they?
Absolutely. Very much so. Yeah. But we've still not seen a quantum computer that can actually deliver an advantage to a bank or hedge fund that I've seen so far, unless they're keeping it very secret, which wouldn't surprise me. But we haven't seen that. And I think until we see that, you're not going to see the SANS course in Grover's search or quantum algorithms.
It takes a while. I mean, I was talking to people recently, and even people who've got, say, like a machine learning or AI-based security startup, like when you listen to actually what they're providing their customers, and they're being quite truthful and very humble, it's not really perhaps the technical research that they're experts in, but it's actually like creating, say, a no-code solution so that, InfoSec professionals can, hire more people that can just get in there and solve the problem. They don't need to be deeply technical. So I think in terms of, cybersecurity, there's still a lot of underlying things that need to be built up before a lot of even that kind of research gets onboarded, because obviously there's lots of other technologies and people trying to build blockchains in corporates going on, and I don't know whether they're finding much utility. Maybe I'll meet someone at DEFCON this year who'll tell me otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
But, and we're all for that. We're all for that discussion. We're excited to have people say like, you're out of your mind. But, there are things that are coming that sort of utilize quantum effects, maybe not quantum computers. And, we've already got things that have come out of quantum theory, for instance, such as transistors and MRI and things like that. So a lot of this is very, very plausible.
I think that more immediately you will see quantum courses on things like post-quantum cryptography because you'll have a need for it. You will need the workforce to understand it. So you'll have a requirement for that. Along with that will come things like what I think called quantum key distribution, where you actually use quantum physics to generate encryption keys between two parties. That's a bit of a gnarly subject for me anyway, because I haven't seen anyone producing. So I've seen like Toshiba have installed with British Telecom, BT, a link between two factories, and they're very proud they got it working. But that's not like an enterprise minimum viable product. And quantum key distribution was, broadly speaking, invented in 1984. Bennett and Brassard, 1984. It's called BB84. Another development of that was Eckert in 1991, so E91. I've not seen much since. I mean, there's lots of development since then, but since there's proof of concepts, like lab-based proof of concepts, there's not been much by way of developing out a minimum viable product that's suitable for enterprise. And after 38 years, you might start thinking, does that mean that it's got major challenges to its viability? And it turns out the answer is like, yes. The mathematics that makes QKD secure is intrinsically related to the fiber or the medium that you use to transmit. So regular cryptography, you could do TLS over Wi-Fi, over Morse code if you wanted to, as long as you transmit all the numbers and, do the handshake in some way, the mathematics makes it secure. But if you do quantum key distribution, the thing that you're sending, the photons or the electrons that you're sending to do the exchange, are intrinsically related to that security.
Okay.
And actually, there's been nearly over half a dozen attacks on quantum key distribution that don't have CVEs or CWEs. It's a bit of a sort of sticking point for it. But there are attacks that are out there against QKD, and the vendors don't want you to kind of know about those. So it's kind of shining a light on a very honest view of where things are. QKD's got a lot of promise. I really like it, but I want there to be more. And at the moment, there isn't. So there you've got a very different kind of solution that isn't just PQC, which may or may not be secure against quantum computers. We're not really certain. You've got a very different solution that should work, but is really hard, and maybe we can fix it.
Yeah. I mean, I see Quantum Village becoming, revolutionary from that perspective, and just getting new security-minded people thinking of quantum. So yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Quantum Village debuting this summer at DEFCON. Talk to me a little bit about the process that it took for you guys to initiate the village and, your path up until this point. Because we're at the 11th hour, so y'all are ready to go. I mean, theoretically, you're ready to go.
I just got back from the US, so I'm clearly going backwards. That's very kind. I mean, I think just in the run-up, both Mark and I have been going to DEFCON. I don't think we've ever met at DEFCON, but so that would be fun. But I think just, from my perspective, dipping my toe in the water of cybersecurity and getting immersed in that ecosystem, I have always found DEFCON kind of my favorite conference. I have always found, I think, the implications, the ethics around a lot of these things very curious. And as a designer, something when I look at things like inclusive design and the implications of when you're creating these systems, I think we do have this kind of fortune with quantum computing, unlike others, is that, we're in a time where we're quite aware of sustainability. You have things like ECG and so on, governance, compliance, all these other things that people are quite mindful of what are the implications. And with that, you don't want it being built with lots of red tape and lots of legislation coming to put out fires. But actually, if you get people more aware of it now and having those conversations now, when it comes to building, with a lot of people who might come, they might never thought their career is going to go into quantum, but it might. And, if you have a good security engineer, it might sow a seed today, and maybe in a few years, they might find themselves dealing with those very issues, those threats that we talk about that aren't here today, but that are going to come. But in terms of applying to get things done, there is a kind of application process that's sort of relatively simple. I don't know, Mark, maybe it's not.
I think it was. I think it was straightforward.
It's sort of, we emailed and we didn't hear back for a few months, and it was sort of like, oh, I guess that's a no.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of validation needed, or was it like check mark, you're good to go?
In defense of our application, I will say, because we were looking at doing this, I think in 2020, so during lockdown, I think, even you and I, Chris, were chatting, like, everyone was there sort of percolating, what can I do? I was very much looking at doing, I was working in kind of that non-profit area within cybersecurity to kind of raise inclusion, those kinds of things. And I was getting like people kind of approaching me for other things. I'm like, that's sort of been done. And, there's no point doing it for the sake of doing it. So we actually spent a long time kind of chewing through our application, getting our logos, things like that, planning what we would have liked to have, experienced for other things. I mean, there are some really great other villages as well. So, it's kind of, we're very fortunate to have a kind of a template. I don't want to be out there sort of claiming we've got huge amounts of originality, but there was certainly a lot of care that went in.
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there for sure. What can attendees expect? Are you guys having, conversational points? Are you going to have any demos set up? Like what should they expect?
So there's a number of things that we're trying to do, and how well they come off, we'll see. But like we're working with some companies who want to help out and are effectively sponsors for the event, where we want to have. So we're going to try and have like the world's first quantum capture the flag.
Yeah,
nice.
And that's something that we're very excited about. The company doing it with us are also really excited about. We're finalizing things and working out how to do challenges. They're sort of looking at how they can sort of support it and build it out. It's really exciting to do something like that. That literally, a room full of, a Zoom call full of very smart people are all like, so what do we do now? That's actually kind of bit refreshing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, I think that's the fun bit of DEFCON. It's less sort of scripted, as you find with all the other kind of big security conferences. Obviously, there are cool ones like B-Sides as well. But we also, I was sort of desperate. We have to get a quantum computer there because a lot of people haven't really seen one, including myself. And, the idea that they're very beautiful. If you look at the kind of cooling towers, they look like chandeliers. But the next best option, which is probably good for the carbon footprint of shifting one of those things, is that we will be having access to a quantum computer. So attendees will be able to use one, which I think is probably even better than just staring at something like a sort of old school museum, like you're on a school trip. And that's being sort of fleshed out. I don't know, Mark, if we've kind of, I know you're doing some notebooks right now, but we're sort of testing that out.
Yeah, so finalizing this stack has been a bit of so I've got ideas for how to do certain things. I've written published some blogs and some publicly available notebooks on Google Colab, if anyone's familiar. So there are some Python notebooks which we can put some links somewhere for people to access, where I show you how to break XOR encryption with a known plaintext attack on a quantum computer. Now, yes, people will be screaming at me, you don't need to do that. And I'm like, no, you don't. But that's not the point. You choose a very straightforward example that we understand really well, that we don't need to have as an example of how to break encryption. Because so the attack is a known plaintext attack. And anyone who's done a little bit of cryptography will know that if you have the plaintext and ciphertext, you can XOR them together to get the key out. That's part of how XOR is that's how you break it. If it's like an XOR firmware or that kind of thing, you just try a few things out and you can get the key. So the point of that, though, is not to educate you on how to break this. It's to show you how to break this very familiar attack in a very unfamiliar setting, which is doing it on a quantum computer. So I've got some ideas like that are already ready to go. I'm rewriting them to fit in with the stack that goes with the people who are providing us with the access. So we're using various libraries, which will all be made very clear by the time we get to the event, to construct various workshops. We're also looking at having some kind of interactive, almost like exhibits, seminars or sessions, open sessions on like how to build a quantum simulator. Like I've actually built a prototype of a badge which might turn into a DEFCON badge add-on, actually, but it's an embedded quantum simulator that runs on a Raspberry Pi Pico. Wow. And no one's done that. The reason is, why? Why would you do that? And when you say, oh, because DEFCON, no one questions it, right? Like, it's the kind of crazy thing. Like, there's no advantage to doing it, except to be able to say that I am wearing a quantum simulator, right? And that is DEFCON cool, I think, anyway. So we're looking at sort of maybe here. Yeah. We're looking at maybe trying to get that done. So that means I definitely have to get some PCBs made now. But things like that are where we're sort of moving. And then, of course, we've got some speakers as well who are sort of coming along, nice. Including one speaker from who's the lead author on a paper on transitioning enterprise to post-quantum cryptography.
Nice.
Yeah.
So like that question that you said, like, how are people going to deal with this? You know, how are people going to actually make this work? Well, we've got a guy who's published at probably one of the most respectable journals in the world. And he's going to come say hello, be around, and actually interact with the community over, okay, here's how you do it. And no, not everyone at DEFCON is from an enterprise background. They don't have to be. Like, it's an interesting problem, I think, anyway. So for us to showcase that and go, look, here's how you solve this kind of problem, whilst balancing things like FIPS regulations and GDPR and everything else, depending on where you are, which jurisdiction you're in. And these are... I enjoy making problems in my life, but I genuinely think that these are interesting questions. And then how are we going to use quantum computers in security? Once you've got enough qubits, can you use those for optimizing blue team problems? We'd see the amount of data coming in from CrowdStrike, log files, Elasticsearch instances, vast amounts of data. And we have already said, well, a quantum computer is a really good optimizer. So are there ways of utilizing that power in a way that benefits cybersecurity professionals?
Yeah, and DEF CON is where you're going to need to be. You're going to have elite hackers that are going to be able to, share their thoughts with you. And then from that, you're going to be able to potentially spawn new ideas.
Well, I mean, I've got an idea of actually making the world's first quantum hackers, because I've got some ideas that I'd like to, sort of push forward.
So you're recruiting there as well.
Well, I don't have a business, full disclosure. I'm not recruiting people like that. But I absolutely am.
You're scouting. You're scouting.
I absolutely am trying to get people to think about, like, okay, so like I said, the control machinery for a quantum computer is just other computers. Oh, well, hang on. I know how to hack those. But what payload would you put onto those control machinery, those control computers, to be able to affect a quantum computer's outputs for some advantage? And all I'm going to say is, like a trailer, all I'm going to say is, I've got some ideas. I'd love to discuss them with people at DEFCON.
There you go. Leave them with that.
Come and be a quantum hacker.
That's it. So yeah, I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's see, outside of Quantum Village, where can listeners to this show, if they can't make it out to DEF CON, where can our listeners find you both online, as well as information on Quantum Village online? Yeah,
there's quantumvillage.org. It's not very beautiful right now, but over the coming weeks it will start getting populated as we sort of get things more set in stone.
Okay.
And I mean, there are a couple of podcasts and other things. I don't know.
Well, post DEF CON, are you planning on putting any findings or maybe conversations that you have had on that website? Is that somewhere that, we could use as a resource?
Absolutely. And I think, for us, it's an annual thing. We've already had a lot of interest of, come to this country, come here, come there. There is something quite unique about DEFCON, and I think that is special. I do believe it's still being streamed. I think the nice thing about post-COVID is a lot of people have kept those things in, so you can still tap into that. But we'll be definitely doing maybe like some webinars and things. I think we were scheduled to do some in the coming weeks. I think it's just that getting the time and coordinating that's always a little challenging.
So we're starting to push more stuff out as well. We have a LinkedIn group called Quantum Village, and we of course have a Twitter handle at Quantum_Village. So we're trying to kick those into gear, get them busier, get them interested. We do have still an open call for participation for people to sort of come. We'll probably keep that open quite a bit, just because we want to get people really sort of who are enthused by this idea of, I want to go and be a quantum hacker now. Come and be one. Come and learn what's going on. Come and see how it is. And like Victoria said, the reaction to people has not been as poo-pooed as it might have been maybe a few years ago. I think some people are waking up to the idea that this is going to be something. We actually don't know what, so it's going to be quite exciting or terrifying.
I think we've sort of curated it in a way that it's everything from, like the paper we mentioned in Nature, which, for any of your listeners, it's a very, very good one because it's very concise, got some cool names on it as well, who are very experienced in the cybersecurity industry, which I think also helps in alongside academia. So there's that kind of cross-pollination.
Cool. And I saw on the website that you had a call for participation. When does that expire? Is that running up into a certain date, or can folks still reach out via the website and be able to be involved with this?
Absolutely. And, even if they don't make this year, there's always next year. But I'd hasten to add sooner the better, just to make our lives a bit easier, because we, really do want to fit in things that we think would be important to include. Awesome.
So when you're not immersed with the quantum computing realm, where's the best bar to go to? And Victoria, you go to DEFCON, so it could be in Vegas.
Oh gosh.
When you put Vegas up against Delaware, I don't know if you're going to go the Delaware route, but you can. And then Mark, wherever you're dwelling, it could be Paris, it could be Vegas, where's the best bar that you've been to?
Well, there is a Paris and Vegas, isn't there? He could be there right now.
That's true.
Paris.
That's true.
I never stipulated. That is true.
Okay. Well, oh God, I've been taken to some very strange places in DEFCON, which is not going to sound good, because I think there's always these isn't there like a other conference called like NavalCon or something? I can't even keep up, or like off strip. A lot of the guys will kind of organize houses and things, and I sort of have to. It's
like the B-side.
Oh,
I know. Fortunately, I've always had good friends or colleagues who are sort of, also being foreign, But I will actually say I will go for Delaware or the tri-state area.
Okay.
Just because I'm probably more seasoned there, and I will go for somewhere which is called Wesley's. And it's actually, I think, in Maryland or Maryland. And it's a social dive, and I love it. It's one of my favorite places. They have karaoke on Thursdays. I really recommend it. They have, I think it's like wings night. When I started going to the US, I didn't actually eat wings, and I think I might have just about be converted, although I did start using a knife and fork, which is probably very embarrassing for people sitting with me. But that's the US ticked off. I can give you more, but...
All right, give us one in the UK.
Well, I wouldn't say a bar. My favourite place to sort of go for tea actually is a place called the Wolseley. So I always joke about going from the Wolseley to Wesley's and back again, but it's in central London. It's quite near where the...
Wait, are you saying the same place with a different accent?
The reason I'm laughing is because from what you described of Wesley's, And from what I know of the Wolseley, they sound very, very different.
Yeah, I guess I would take, a meeting with a CISO at the Wolseley, and then we'd, meet all the reverse engineers at Wesley's. So that would sort of balance it out.
Okay. Wow. I don't think I can live up to that. What I'm going to do is go to, okay. I would go to one of my favorite, there's many pubs. I'm a pub goer. Sorry. It's in my blood. I'm British. I go to pubs. I will probably go to, in London, either the City of York, because it's a Sam Smith's pub, which means that, the beer is really cheap. And it's really kind of cute inside. They've got these lovely little booths, so you can feel like you're conspirators, because they're really narrow, really tightly packed in. You can fit 4 people, and that's it. I quite like it there. It's kind of fun. Or I would choose somewhere like along the river. So near Hammersmith Bridge, there's a load of pubs near there. It's near where they film one of the scenes in the most recent Bond movie. So there's occasionally people taking photographs as if they were with the characters, which is always kind of cute.
Maybe they're just looking for spies.
Or they're just looking for spies because they made the film about it, and that's, of course, where they're going to go. But no, I'd probably go for a drink around there. There's quite a few pubs around there. The Black Lion, the Blue, I can't remember, the Ships Inn, a few others. Yeah, so I like drinking by a river because I do. I just grew up with it. I'm from Liverpool, so if you're actually looking for bars in my hometown, I go to a bar called Bar Savard, spot the French way. Actually, a tequila bar.
Okay.
And if you don't go there sober, please. And if you do get there, see if they still do a thing that a mate of mine and I invented so they have flavored tequilas, and we invented the fruit salad to make ourselves think we were being healthy, which was just 6 shots of flavored tequila.
Nice. They still have it?
I don't know, but there was a few bar people who I would order that with. I don't know their names. All I know is that they were wonderful people.
I'll have to go validate that for you.
Please do.
And this is in what area again, specifically?
This is in Liverpool, out the way.
In the United Kingdom.
Yes, it's where the Beatles are
I don't know
from.
what your audience is like in the
United Kingdom. Let me specify that.
Yeah.
It's where all the music.
Agree.
It's where all the music that your parents listen to.
Yes.
I actually didn't like the Beatles when I was in Liverpool, which is, absolute heresy.
You're going to be allowed back in?
Yeah, I am, because of what I'm about to say, which is, but now I've left, I listen to them regularly.
There you go.
Aww.
There you go. All right. You've redeemed yourself.
I hope so.
All right. So I just heard last call here. Do you guys have time for one more?
Sure.
Always.
Mark, I'm going to hit you first because you answered first.
Okay.
If you opened a cybersecurity themed bar, what would the name be? And what would your signature drink be called?
Oh, okay. I would open a bar, probably in Maryland, because that seems to be the cool place for this kind of thing. I would open a bar called the Entangled State, and I would have a drink called the Whiskey Cubit.
The Whiskey Cubit. I love it. Entangled State. So you get twisted in there, essentially, is what you're saying.
That's exactly where I'm going.
Whiskey Cubit. Okay. You can go so many ways with that. Literally.
Well, and you can go the other way, and everyone knows about it. But
oh yeah. Well, Maryland's only like 10 minutes from me, so I should be able to make it home safely. That's a quick Uber ride. All right, Victoria, what's up? What you got?
Oh gosh, is it a bar or a cocktail?
No, it's both. You need a bar name and you need a drink name.
Oh gosh. Okay, well then I'll just have to be quite obvious. and called it superpositions.
What is it called?
Superpositions.
Secret positions?
No, superpositions.
Oh,
God, we need subtitles.
superpositions. Okay.
And it would be partly in like Quantum Village in Vegas. It would also be on top of the Berghain in Berlin. And everyone would be drinking Quantinis, which would have tea in it because I quite like drinking tea.
Quantinis.
Maybe yerba mate, because that's what they drink in Berlin to sort of keep up, stay up late. I think that'll be about it.
Having worked in Berlin, that sounds like the best thing ever.
Yeah, but can you get into the Berghain? This might allow you to.
Yeah, I can.
Obviously, very hard.
Maybe you have to solve like this. You got to, decrypt some quantum algorithm to get in. Like, so when you get in, you're dealing with people that know what they're doing. Make some math problem at the door. I don't know. Because you just don't want anyone walking in. You don't want someone, that's coming over from the World League walking in.
That's terrible.
We do. Come to Quantum Village then.
Yeah,
it's like
we'll have
that's why it's superpositions.
Exactly. We'll have to have Quantinis and whiskey cubits at QV, won't we? Like
yes.
I'm not sure after you talking about this what's it, quadruple type tequila drink.
I don't think it's too late to get a bartender at Quantum Village. Especially
we'll have to
the Quantini, or maybe Mark will be back there making drinks. I don't know, or maybe I can come do it.
I can make drinks. You can come help.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you both for stopping by Barcode. I appreciate you both sharing your knowledge, and really look forward to seeing you both at DEFCON.
Absolutely.
Amazing. So likewise, and thank you for having us.
Absolutely. You guys take care. As you know, Barcode is where security and IT professionals hang out after a long day. So, get your message front and center to our fans by sponsoring an episode. Learn more at thebarcodepodcast.com/sponsor. Cheers.
Unfortunately, it's time to shut the bar down for this episode. Thanks for stopping in. See you next time. We'll save you a seat. Be sure to check us out at thebarcodepodcast.com.